Hello and welcome to Unfold. I am Jawad Tehami. In today's program, we are going to take up for discussion two important developments which directly relate to India. The first relates to the worst human rights and the worst religious freedom situation in India due to that policy by the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is following the objectives of RSS. And there is a report by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and also we'll be talking about the back-to-back embarrassments for the Indian Air Force. In the first segment, we'll be talking about the latest report of the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom, which has recommended that India be designated as a country of particular concern. In the second segment, we are going to try to understand from defense analysts' perspective the probable causes of Indian Tejas, which crashed in Dubai Air Show, where at the same time we have also seen that very expression of interest of the potential customers of the marvel of Pakistan, China, co-design, co-development and co-production of JF-17 Thunder Block 3 in particular. So starting with the first segment of today's show, the US Commission on International Religious Freedom has recommended the US government to designate India as a country of particular concern owing to egregious religious freedom violations. Now, this commission in its latest report has also made other recommendations. Noteworthy of these recommendations include imposition of targeted sanctions on individuals and entities such as Vikas Yadav and RAW, which is Indian Intelligence Agency. Also another recommendation which is noteworthy is conducting a review assessing whether arms sales to India may contribute or exacerbate the religious freedom of violations. Now, this particular Commission on International Religious Freedom is a bipartisan independent legislative branch assembly which recommends to the President and the Congress and the Secretary of State regarding after monitoring, analyzing and reporting the religious freedoms in the foreign countries. Also recommends them the measures to deter religious violations and also promote freedom of religion and belief. The report also takes the stock of how Bharatiya Janata Party, since it came into power back in 2014, follows the RSS objectives, has resorted to hate speech, misinformation and disinformation against the minorities to gather that political mileage and also the electoral advantage, which has led to the attacks against the minorities, most particularly when we talk about Muslims in India. This report also talks about how the authorities, which are of course led by Bharatiya Janata Party, have used the laws, weaponized the laws to discriminate and disenfranchise the minorities. It also talks about how RAW, Indian Intelligence Agency, has been involved in assassinations and attempts on the foreign soils. It also talks about the gap between Indian constitution, the spirit of it, the provisions which guarantee the religious freedom to Indian citizens, but the gap and the difference with the state laws and weakness is also highlighted as far as the Indian judicial system is concerned, to have a deeper understanding regarding all these issues which have been highlighted in this particular latest report by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. We are on to being joined through the video link by Mr. Ali Sarwar Naqvi, his former ambassador. Mr. Naqvi, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Unfold tonight. We really appreciate that. Also at the same time, through the video link, we are on to being joined by Mr. Syed MUAZ Shah. He is international law expert. Mr. Shah, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Excellency Ambassador Naqvi, firstly, let me begin with you. Now, this particular report is by a bipartisan independent legislative branch agency which monitors, analyzes and reports regarding the religious freedoms on the foreign soils and makes certain recommendations. Firstly, what is the significance of this particular recommendation? The first of which is that India be designated as a country of particular concern. And do you think it is a scathing censure of the kind of policies the Bharatiya Janata Party had been pursuing since it took power back in 2014 to date?
Yes. Actually, you see, the US government issues a number of reports every year on making a global survey of the specific topic that that report is dealing with. This report on religious freedom has a long history and has been published every year regularly by the US government. And it's a bipartisan report, which is basically done by the Congressional Research Service, which is the CRS. And the Congressional Research Service analyzes all the data available. Basically, these data figures and the information is provided by the embassy, the concerned US embassy in that capital. So in this case, it would be New Delhi, and also other embassies like the embassy in Islamabad and neighboring countries. Now, India has been dealing with its minorities in a manner which is extremely objectionable. And it has shown total intolerance of the diversity of different religious groups and communities. This includes not only the Muslims, but also Christians and the Dalits and the Sikhs. Now, and the Jains and Buddhists and all these other different religious groups. But the biggest minority group in India is the Muslim community. And the report finds India at fault in not giving due rights to the Muslims and, in fact, persecuting them for various reasons that are related to the religion. And that is defined very broadly as religious intolerance. And the report makes it clear that the Indian majority and the government of BJP, affected or influenced by the RSS, is dealing with the Muslims and with the Muslim community in a highly objectionable manner by persecuting them, by not giving them any of the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. They are even not allowing Muslims to rent housing, and the local landlords have started discriminating against Muslims in giving access to their homes for renting purposes. So this provides.
Ambassador NAQVI, Excellency, I see your pardon for the interjection over here. There's a long list of the kind of egregious religious freedom violations when we specifically talk about the minorities, and more specifically when we talk about the kind of status the Muslims have been faced with, especially since BJP came into power back in 2014. There's a long list this particular report also talks about quite in detail. Now, when we talk about this particular report talking about the kind of status of other minorities when it comes to Sikhs, Dalits and Christians, there has been an involvement of its intelligence agency RAW when it comes to export of transnational terrorism on the foreign soils. That assassination on the Canadian soil, also an assassination attempt on the US soil, the Department of Justice has also issued the indictment about. Now, given at a time when the bilateral relationship between the US and India has already deteriorated to a considerable extent, how significant is the timing of this particular report as far as the future trajectory of this particular bilateral relationship between the two countries is concerned?
This is a very important question that you have asked. I think this report will have a very important impact on the bilateral relationship between India and the US, particularly in view of the previous actions by the Indian agencies and Indian government, the RAW in Canada and in the US and also in Australia, of not counting Pakistan, where they have been causing a lot of terrorist activities through their proxies. India is actually at fault with many of these very nefarious activities that their agencies have been carrying out. And the report comes as a culmination of all these acts and individual incidents. So the impact of this report on the bilateral relationship of India on the US as well as on other countries would be very, very severe and would really put India in the dock for this kind of
manifestations of that particular impact that you already termed could be very severe as far as this particular bilateral relationship between India and the US is concerned. Excellency, I'll come back to you for your understanding regarding that also. Let me proceed towards Mr. Shah. Mr. MUAZ Shah, now when we specifically talk about this particular report, designating India as a country of a particular concern means what? And what could be the possible options at the hands of the US administration at this particular point in time? We've seen this particular report being published back to back in the previous years as well. There has also been an expression of concern on the part of various top officials from the US administration, but the designation of India hasn't been done. Do you think this time around we see it coming, or the previous pattern is going to continue as far as US administration's approach is concerned?
Well, thank you first for having me, and you're right about that. You mentioned it in your introduction that the impact of this report can be detrimental to the relations with India that are already on the downslope, and possibly that's another reason why this is coming now and hasn't come earlier. One of the main key impacts from this report that can occur is the recommendations to the U.S. government to designate India as that country of special particular concern, as you mentioned, the CPC. And then on top of that, of course, imposing targeted sanctions on individuals that could come from this recommendation as well. And then, of course, direct the diplomatic mission was the third recommendation to the government to then voice their concerns when they happen in country. So I think that's an important point, that what's happening almost on a daily basis. We hear from various reports from, for example, you have cow vigilantes going around abusing, killing Muslims in particular. And I think that's a particular thing even the report indicated that is important also to note, that, for example, their citizenship law that they passed excluded Muslims compared to other minorities. So Muslims have been, of all the minority groups, the main ones that have been suffering the most. There have been particular, for example, state policies against so-called love jihad. So much to the extent that the report even mentions that one state went to even create life sentences for anybody who decides to marry outside interfaith marriage. So clearly, I think one of the things, international law that they appeal to, which I think is a very important point, and it's the impact of this report as well, is the International Covenant on Civil Political Rights, Article 18, the freedom to express your religious beliefs and not be subject to coercion, not be forced to practice something else other than that. And of course, that states are only authorized to restrict it in the interest of public safety, order, health, or morals. And these fundamental rights are not to be otherwise derogated. But unfortunately, India, through its various passage of laws, we know specifically, again, targeting Muslims, the Waqf law that they passed this year, in fact, which was specifically targeted Muslim charitable lands that have been existing for decades, if not hundreds of years. That is clearly attacking Muslim civil society. The Uniform Code laws that prevent marriages and Islamic rules in respect to marriage. These are all things particularly focused against Muslims. And one thing that is very important to mention before I pass it on is this connection that you mentioned between BJP and RSS. This is the nexus that they, again, emphasize in this report and highlighted. In fact, the BJP policies were actually implementing RSS agenda, and it clearly mirrored that. And I think that was an important point that the report did indicate. So we're hoping to see if there's some impact.
Important points, Mr. MUAZ Shah, you have raised regarding as to how certain laws have been weaponized in order to discriminate as well as disenfranchise the minorities, and the most brunt of which the Muslims in particular have faced over the last many years under the rule of Bharatiya Janata Party. The second point, the international law instrument, when you talk about this particular report talking about the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Article 18, which is of course derived from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, India being not only the signatory to the said covenant, but also has ratified it. When we talk about the Article 18 and its sub-clauses, are there any sort of remedial measures or any mechanism within that particular covenant if any signatory which has ratified that particular covenant goes into violation of any of the provision of that particular said treaty, what are the mechanisms to hold it accountable? What does that particular mechanism within that covenant actually stipulate?
Thank you. That's a very important point. One of the key things is that they allow the national structures to work first. And that's an unfortunate reality, but they want to give the Indian government a chance to get it right. But as indicated in the report itself, it said that the federal government at certain times cannot investigate crimes that happen within states without states' approval. And this is trickled down in the report, it says, to the mob violence that is not even controlled by the state police structure. So how can someone even report and then try to seek justice? In those cases and circumstances, after exhausting remedies in the domestic courts, the national courts, a person can approach the United Nations directly to the Human Rights Committee, and they can file an individual complaint on the violation on Article 18. Not only that, but you also have, of course, India goes to the Universal Periodic Review. And other states, including Pakistan and other countries who are members of the United Nations, can raise questions and press India on developments in respect to this. And I think it's very important both for individuals to process these cases, and NGOs can assist in applying certain cases to reach that level. And it raised some serious concerns in the right platforms. But the countries also have to play a constructive role in addressing these concerns for India, and happy to see that the United States is openly calling this out.
Right, Mr. Shah, you already alluded to a very important point, that connection which this particular report also talks about, the connection between Bharatiya Janata Party and RSS, although this particular report also talks about that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has tried to distance himself from the affiliation with RSS. There is also something that is being referred to when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. I'll come to that particular point, but keeping ourselves for now to the legal points of this particular matter. Now, this particular report talks about India's judicial system, which it says is slow and complex and currently faces a significant backlog, which has severe implications for religious minorities in pre-trial detention. As of 2022, for example, there are an estimated of 40 million cases pending in the lower courts, an additional of 6 million in the high courts. Do you think the kind of justice the minorities or Muslims, Sikhs, Christians or Dalits actually seek from the judicial system is actually affected or badly impacted because of this particular backlog of the pending cases, both in the lower courts as well as the high courts of India?
Absolutely. And I think one important statistic that's also mentioned in that report is more than 70% of those who are in prison are non-convicts. They are not convicted of any crimes. They are just under trial prisoners. But unfortunately, due to the environment that's created against the minorities, they're not even giving bail because they've created those crimes, like I said, the Cal vigilantes, or for example, the what they call love jihad crimes. They don't give bail. And as a result of that, under trial prisoners who sometimes are even political prisoners just for voicing their concerns are in prison, and then they get free after 5 years. But what sense of justice is that? So those 40 million cases, unfortunately, a lot of the pending cases have people behind bars, and most of them are disproportionately the minorities, and out of them, disproportionately Muslims. So clearly, this is a integrated policy from the top down, and there is no interest of the Indian government to reform any of this. And that's one of the reasons why this report is extremely important, and why the recommendations, not only to the U.S. government, but to the U.S. Congress, are very pertinent. And I think where India understands is defense. And I think one of the very specific mentioning that you mentioned broadly about the defense contracts is the Reaper drone. There was a specific mention to the Reaper drone access to that technology should be reconsidered based on these circumstances. That's where India may try to take this very seriously because it hampers their defense capabilities and access to defense tools. Otherwise, no other pressure can really hopefully react India to actually doing something. So I'm happy to see that and
Dr.
looking
Muaz,
forward to
Mr. Muaz Shah, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. That is exactly the point I was about to come on. That very recommendation, this particular report, which says, let me quote, conduct a review assessing whether arms sales to India, such as MQ-9B drones under Section 36 of Arms Export Control Act, may contribute to or exacerbate religious freedom violations. Now, given the fact we recently saw there was an extension of the defense framework between the US and India, this particular recommendations, does it at all pertain to the recent development between the US and India regarding that extension of the defense framework for the next 10 years? And also I want your view regarding as to how this particular sale of arms to India, especially this which has been mentioned, MQ-9B drones under Section 36 of Arms Export Control Act, contributes or exacerbates religious freedom violations there.
So in particular, these drones are obviously, the modern use of technology we're seeing since the war in Azerbaijan, that the drone use is significantly gained importance. We see this in Russia, Ukraine. The drones have been used already in operations to suppress Kashmiri aspirations and freedom of rights that have been there, blocking freedom of movements, and using that as surveillance tools for that. And as you know, the report also focused on Kashmir as well and mentioned about those concerns about the rights of Kashmiris, which I think is very pertinent. And that's the connection here, because as we know, most of the Kashmiri population that is being suppressed almost entirely is Muslims. So again, these tools are being used in a way to suppress Muslim minorities throughout India. Now, it's very possible that these drones, again, it says in the report that there should be a review that possibly if these drones may be utilized in other tools. As we know, the situation in Assam is also getting quite critical. We might see that India may start using some of these tools elsewhere for surveillance purposes to maybe perhaps even suppress Muslims.
I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. Mr. Syed Muaz Shah, international law expert, joining us through the video link. Thank you very much for taking time out for Unfold tonight. Really appreciate it. We're also joined by Mr. Ali Sarwar Naqvi, former ambassador. Let me also quote one excerpt from this particular report, which talks about the kind of role Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India had played when it comes to the Gujarat riots back in 2002 when he was the chief minister over there. Later on, the US government back in 2005 also banned Modi from entering the United States under the 1998 International Religious Freedom Act, citing his responsibility in severe violations of religious freedom during the 2002 Gujarat riots. I think after this particular latest report also, it is incumbent upon the US administration to revisit and review its policy when it comes to the treatment of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi because of his role back in 2002 in Gujarat riots. That brings us to the end of the first segment. In the second segment, we are going to talk about that ugly crash of the Tejas in the Dubai International Air Show. Back-to-back embarrassments coming for Indian Air Force. For that, stay tuned. Welcome back to Unfold. In this particular segment, we are going to talk about the two air weapon systems. On one side, we are going to understand as to the kind of beauty, a thing of beauty, as John Keats says, a thing of beauty is joy forever. And that is exactly the code which I am using for JF-17 Thunder, which is a marvel of Pakistan and China's co-design, co-development, and co-production. We'll be trying to compare as to what Indian Air Force has got in its hands. That very ugly crash during the Dubai International Air Show and which has actually raised a lot of questions regarding India's defense aviation industry and the kind of the safety and the protocols and the standards related with that particular aircraft, Tejas, which is boasted as one of the indigenous aircrafts of India. When we specifically talk about Pakistan Air Force, this particular marvel, which I have already talked about, JF-17 Thunder Block 3. We have seen on one side that ugly crash of Tejas happening in Dubai International Air Show. On the other side, we have also seen JF-17 Thunder becoming that very focal point of attention, and many potential future customers have actually expressed their interest regarding the procurement of this particular marvel of Pakistan, indigenization of the aircrafts. Also, when we talk about the kind of history associated with both of these programs, this particular Tejas program was it began 1 decade before the commencement of the program that related to JF-17 in Pakistan. But JF-17 Thunder now, as we speak, stands to be a combat proven weapon system, 4.5 generation aircraft, which is laced with the modern technology and equipment. What are the weaknesses of Tejas? We'll try to understand that. Also, when we talk about the combat scenarios, JF-17 Thunder made a mark most recently in Marka-e-Haq back in May 2025 against Indian Air Force, also back in 2019 during Operation Swift Resort. Let me quickly bring in, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Commodore retired RAZA HAIDER. He is the defense analyst. Mr. HAIDER, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also, through the video link, we are honored to be joined by Mr. Air Vice Marshal retired KHALID Chishti. He is defense analyst. Mr. Chishti, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. HAIDER, if you allow me, let me begin the discussion with Mr. Chishti. Mr. Chishti, what could be the possible causes regarding this very ugly crash of Tejas at such an important international event? Is it something that relates to only particularly one cause, or it is the combination of multiple causes? What's your understanding?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jawad, for inviting me over for this program. And on the onset, let me offer my condolence to the aggrieved family, obviously Wing Commander Sial, who lost his life. This is a tragic incident. And also, I'd like to convey the sentiments of Pakistan Air Force, because I spoke to the senior Pakistan Air Force leadership this afternoon. And obviously, they were offering condolence to the aggrieved family, because we believe that this was not a contested sky. This was a friendly sky, and this was a human loss. This was not a combat kill in which we should feel good or happy about it. So I want to differentiate both separately. That's one. Now, coming back to your question, that what is the probable cause? You see, it's first we need to look at the environment in which this Tejas has come out in last about 4 decades that you were referring to. That was 1985 when Tejas was conceived, and after 10 years, we thought of making our own aeroplanes. In 30 years, we have almost 200 aeroplanes flying in Pakistan Air Force, whereas in 40 years, Indian Air Force has only about 40 aircraft. That's one difference. They conceived this aircraft and they thought that this will be a made in India pride. Of course, every country has the right to do that. But then they thought that we will also make the engines. That was for the first time ever, the Indian aircraft manufacturing company, Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, wanted to manufacture the engines. Having not succeeded for quite some time, they thought of adopting the engine from USA, that is General Electric engine F414 and 404. Now, General Electric company is one of the renowned international company which makes engines not only for fighter jets, but also for commercial and civil airliners. These engines were, after they were inducted, the airframe was not compatible to the engine. That's what my take was. I've been following very closely this aircraft, because this was obviously a rival aircraft to JF-17 Thunder. So I've been watching this progress very closely for many years. The engine that they thought would be a kind of cut and paste, it did not prove that. It was a matter of compatibility of the thrust, avionics, software integrations, and then the weapons integration. and some even had the vibrations and the oil leak and fuel leaks, etc. complaints that they had through engines. That's one. Because this is Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, does not fall under any Air Force control, so they have been always a kind of mismatch, lack of understanding, lack of difference of opinion, the expectation differences between what the manufacturer was making, what the actual stakeholder wanted it to be. So this was not the aircraft. And since these 40 aircraft have been delivered, I have watched Indian Air Force very closely, and they are saying that we wanted to have a fighter jet and not a political product. Now that's the language that they use, because they believe that this was a political product thrusted upon us because of their vested interest, and obviously because of their prioritization. And the future of this aircraft was mostly decided by those civil bureaucrats or the government officials and the politicians, and not the professionals, which is the case what you were referring right in the beginning, that we were talking about JF-17 Thunder. On the other hand, let me compare very quickly Pakistan Air Force. As I said, that we have not only inducted these aeroplanes, but we have upgraded from 1 to 2 to 3. The Block 3 is now operational, of which we've had numerous other countries flying. And recently, obviously, many more countries have shown their interest. Last point on this topic is that this is a very highly contested platform. This is called a $1 billion platform, or a stage, Dubai Air Show. This is one of the biggest the globe can offer. Billions of deals are signed on this. And let me give you a very small example. 59 Boeing 777-9 has been signed by Emirates, obviously from the Boeing company, just about 2 days back. This is the significance of this air show. There are about 200 aeroplanes, helicopters are participating on display, and obviously carrying out the aerobatics like this unfortunate Tejas did. So this is hugely contested ground, where obviously the political leadership, especially the military leaders and the policy makers, and those people who are at the helm of affair, they come and see this air show, they come and see the performance of the aircraft, they interact physically to see how their suitability with their Air Force or Army or Navy. So they signed the agreements. So this will go a long way against India, because they've suffered a loss. They have had these hiccups domestically, but this was the first ever a public embarrassment, and obviously they'll take long to recover out of it.
Right, Mr. Chishti, please stay with us. I'll come back to you for your understanding, a number of other aspects as well. Mr. Haider, now back in March 2024, in Rajasthan, there was an earlier crash of Tejas, right? During the investigation, there was a failure found with the oil pump malfunction, right? As far as this particular latest crash during the Dubai International Air Show is concerned, where do you think this particular investigation, which is underway, is probably going to actually lead? Do you think it could also lead to the same reasons which relate to the technical problems with that particular aircraft, the earlier of which we have already seen is the oil pump malfunction, which led to actually engine seizure?
Thank you, Tehami Saab. First of all, it is too early to say where the investigation will go and what is the final cause. So I cannot link with the oil issue which happened last year with the Tejas and caused the crash. Actually, there is FDR, flight data recorder, cockpit voice recorder, and there are so many variables and parameters which actually will be available to the investigators to decide what is the reason of crash. That may be a human factor, that may be the maintenance factor, it may be the design factor. So I would see that this investigation would go in a way where it may have a strategic impact on the aviation industry of India. As far as the impact on the international customer, already Chishti highlighted that it will be having a very negative impact, because a crash in front of a customer shaken his confidence, and it is very difficult for a sale of that aircraft which crashed in front of so many people. However, what would be the impact? I would like to see it from the strategic lens. What would be the impact of this crash on the India and especially on Indian aviation industry? Number one, Tejas, which has already been delayed by years and years, and as Sir highlighted also, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh said 40 aircraft in 40 years. Last 40 years, only 40 aircraft. And he said technology delayed is technology denied. Means if this technology is available to me now, which is a technology of 1980s or 90s, it is of no use, and still it is not deliverable. And this Mark 1, which actually crashed yesterday, it this Mark 1 and Mark 1A, which is the next, which is in line with the order of 180 at under production at Hull, there are so many issues available to this aircraft. There is an engine issue, the flight controls issue, autopilot, avionics integration, radar integration. So these issues are actually contributing somewhere.
With so many issues at the same time, do you think it's feasible? Is it advisable for any Air Force to fly their
In the air show. In my opinion, it was premature to have its display.
That actually landed in no man's area over there. But if
It is
it could have
premature.
landed in the spectators,
You see,
it could have
already,
actually turned
in
into
my
a huge
opinion,
fiasco. No?
Tejas should not have been marketed at this stage. Hull is not even able to produce 180 aircraft which are already ordered by Indian Air Force. So what they are actually marketing for? That is one. Number two, Tejas has multiple issues. It cannot perform in any air show probably safely or something unless these issues are not resolved. These issues are somehow resolved in Mark 1A, which is under production, and Mark 2, they are saying that would be produced in 2028, and then they have a 5th generation program, AMCA 235 to be produced. But these aircraft once produced, will it be relevant in that time frame? In 2035, if AMCA would be produced and operationalized by 2040, it is a question maybe in the Indian media also, will that be relevant also? So probably not.
Okay, Mr. Chishti, I want your understanding regarding as to when you talked of that Indian Air Force talking that they did not actually receive, they wanted a fighter jet, but they've got a political product. How much do you think corruption as a phenomenon has to deal with it? It makes me recall one of the movies from Bollywood, the Indian movie industry, that is Rang De Basanti, that also particularly talks about how corruption actually plays a role when it comes to the procurement of the parts and these aircraft. How much that particular phenomenon has to deal with this particular entire equation?
You see, Mr. Jawad, we need to see that there is a project and then you have to have a cause and then you have to have an element of urgency. These three things have to match, only then you can have a good product. That means you have to have a persuasion, you have to have a timeline, you have to enable the budgeting, obviously, you have to create those resources. If the technology has to be imported from abroad, it has to reach on time. Corruption has been one factor only. It's not only that it's only the corruption that the aircraft has failed. No, the aircraft has failed because they have been conflicting expectations of the users, which is obviously Indian Air Force versus the manufacturers. That is why the Indian Air Force has been saying that we wanted to have a jet aircraft, not a political product. That's the background that they think that this is being thrusted, because the politicians have their preferences, they have their own negotiations behind the curtains. Much is not known to the actual stakeholders, which is the Air Force. And let's top it up. On top of that, what Indian Air Chief had said then on the 9th January 2025, this year, he said, I want more aircraft, in which he talked that 2016 until date, I have not gotten even a single aircraft. He was saying that I need these aircraft Tejas to stay relevant, to have the fear in the mind and hearts of my enemy. Just 5 months down, what happened on 6th and 7th May? Nothing worked. And on top of that, what you're saying is that it has serious issues. It has flight controls. It has, because such an aerobatics, obviously, which you need to do at such a in front of huge public, millions of people globally watching you, there is a huge pressure on the pilot. A 1 millisecond malfunction on the side of the aeroplane or misjudgment on the behalf of pilot obviously can lead to a disaster. And this is what has happened. And if there is a combination, it could happen even quicker and faster. That's one. Most importantly, you notice that even Indian Air Force Chief AP Singh, he is so helpless. On 30th May 2025, this year after the conflict, Mark I hug, he said, when I sign a contract with a company of an aeroplane or weapons, on the signature date, I know that this timeline, the delivery date is not going to be met, but I still sign. Can you feel the sense of disappointment, the element of uneasiness, the helplessness? And Mr. Jawad, you'll agree that that kind of helplessness travels down to the soldier, the sailor, or the airman. That's one point. Look at the other side, what you were referring right in the beginning, JF-17 Thunder. Do you see, now it's a combat-proven, war-tested aircraft. And alhamdulillah, it is a success story. That is the reason that numerous countries are approaching Pakistan Air Force for procurement of this aircraft. Recently, Pakistan Air Force chief was in Dubai, obviously. Numerous that I was following it very closely, and I'm in touch with Pakistan Air Force, and I got the information. They've more than probably 1.5 dozen or close to 2 dozen the top leaders of the air forces, particularly where they wanted to connect with Pakistan Air Force chief. For what? Mainly because JF-17 Thunder was a tested aircraft. Everybody was keen to know more about it. And what you saw on the tarmac when the aircraft was displayed, this is a part of history that even the Indians are getting themselves snapped in front of the aircraft. This is an acknowledgement of not Pakistan. The aircraft has proven its worth. Only then people will connect with you. You do not market at your own and people will come running to you without watching it. It's a combat tested. That's a plus thing. Tejas was, let me share where Tejas was during this combat. Tejas was deployed at Sulur Air Base, which is close to Sri Lanka. All these 2 squadrons that they have of this aircraft never came about 1,500 closer than Pakistan border. What was the reason? They found it unfit to be put into the combat. Whereas JF-17 Thunder was flying day in, day out, starting from northmost hilly, snow-covered mountains to into the sea. And you saw the performance of what happened to S-400, surface-to-air missile, what the Indians were obviously trying to aim Pakistani jets. And what did this aircraft do to them? Alhamdulillah. So what I'm trying to say, there has been a long story. And on the Indian side, unfortunately, because of the kickbacks, because of the political influence, because of the unrealistic expectations, timeline, lack of persuasion, lack of common objectives, obviously, has led to this day. The only difference...
I get your point. I see your partner for the interjection over here. We're pressed with time. Air Vice Marshal Retired KHALID CHISHTI, Defense Analyst, joining us through the video link. Thank you very much for being with us. Your closing comments when it comes to the training of the pilots. There'll be a miscalculation factor also at play when it comes to the recent crash of Tejas. On the other hand, in Pakistan, we've got the full mission simulators as well. How do you compare the two? Very quickly, please.
I can compare the two very quickly that the morale of the Indian Air Force pilots are very low after the especially post-Markai-Haq. And due to the shrinking of the squadron strength, that reduced from 42 to 29 now, they have a pressure of the cockpit to aircraft ratio also. So there are so many factors which can lead to this crash. However, as far as the piloting skill is concerned in this, the best aircraft and the best pilot are selected for the air shows. So it cannot be said at this moment whether it's a pilot error or it's a technical or design issue, as I told you before.
Mr. Air Commodore Retired RAZA, HAIDER, Defense Analyst, thank you very much for taking time out for Unfold tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode of Unfold. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.